Instagram. It will just take a second.
I think we're live right now.
We are live. That's what I'm saying. We are live on YouTube, and now we are live on both. And there's a little bit of delay every week because of Instagram's problem. All right. Tonight, as you guys know, I get to travel around and do interesting things with my social media page. And last year, I got to meet Summer, and is it Lindelien? Is that how you pronounce that?
It's Lindelien, but
Lindelien. So Lindelien, the fisheries biologist here close to me in Florida.
That's right.
And I looked you up, and I saw a Minnesota. You were in Minnesota.
Yes.
Years ago. So how does a girl go from Minnesota to becoming a fisheries biologist and researching Florida bass?
Well, that's a great question. I was born and raised in Minnesota, and kind of like southeastern Minnesota near some of the big river systems like the Mississippi, St. Croix. So I grew up doing a lot of fishing. I did walleye fishing, which is a lot different than bass fishing, but I sort of was exposed to sport fishing at a young age, and I really enjoyed it. And I think even since I was in like elementary school, I always wanted to do something with fish. So over time, through ice fishing in Minnesota, getting sort of sick of the cold, I decided that I was going to take an assistantship down at UF. Mm-hmm. And so I came down here in 2016, and I basically worked for FWC as like a Bio 1, doing creel clerk stuff, just driving the boat around, getting my toes in the water, if you will, with Florida bass. And I would go out and kind of help with some of the annual assessments that they did here in the Gainesville office, and started to see some really big fish at our local lakes like Noonan's. And I spent a lot of time at Rodman, and we can talk more about that later. But then, so I went on to do my grad research at UF, and my study lake was Rodman Reservoir. And so I did a study, and it was primarily focused on aging bass. So I had some experience in Minnesota doing age and growth of like yellow perch and bluegill and walleye. And then when I came down here, I took on a new method, which was like a novel, non-lethal method to take and test 7 different fin structures on Florida bass and see how precise and biased they were compared to using a lethal structure like an otolith, which is what most people use because it's the most accurate, but you do have to kill the fish to get it out. And so, yeah, that was what my study was on. It was looking at non-lethal aging of Florida bass. And so we would have to go out to Rodman and collect tons and tons of fish every month to do all this aging. And so I sort of kind of fell in love with really big fish when I came down here, and I stayed down here after my assistantship, and I took a job with FWC. And so I've worked as a fish biologist there since 2019.
Wow. There's only about 60 million questions I've got on my mind. Let's just start with Rodman, because that's where I'm not going to get it off my mind. And for the guys who follow along, my usual suspects, they're climbing into the comments here. What's up, Frank? What's up, Mike? Rodman is the lake that is behind my house here in Florida, where I moved to. Mm-hmm. So what'd you find?
What did I find?
Yeah, what'd you find on your research project? Let's start with that.
Yeah, so kind of like the lowdown on that. And we did a lot of different linear models, and we worked with some of our biostatisticians, even at FWC, to try to figure out 2 different metrics. So the most important things to remember when you're aging fish is you really have to be precise with your ages and unbiased. And what that means is being precise is when you have 2 different ages, like from 2 different people reading a structure, it's how similar those ages to one another. And the bias, or basically when you want to be unbiased, that's when you're comparing an age to a known age. And so to break this down otoliths, like I mentioned before, those are the primary structure used to age Florida bass because they're most accurate. They've been validated against known age fish. And so what we did is we compared these fin structures, which are non-lethally removed. You cut them off the fish and it doesn't harm the fish. I also did a study on that afterwards, but we just wanted to check and make sure that it didn't actually kill the fish or cause injury, which it doesn't. But anyway, so you take those non-lethal structures, you section them. There's a whole lot of processing that goes into it. And then you view them with a microscope, like cross-sectionally. So you take a transverse section with like a jeweler's saw. They call it a low-speed saw with a little diamond wafering blade, and you cut little 0.5 millimeter sections out of the fin, transverse.
Out of the bony part of the fin, or the
so there's two different types when you're talking about bony part. So bass have dorsal spines and dorsal rays on the top of their body, and so those are, you could say hard and soft, because the spines are hard and bony parts, and then the rays are soft and they're branched actually. So they're structurally a little bit different the way that they grow. They're branched and kind of fused at the base. Whereas the spine, it just has a central blood vessel. So it's really just one piece that you're sectioning. And then you look down into that, sort of like tree rings, just like you do when you age an otolith. And so you count, there's alternating bands, you count them. There's translucent and opaque bands. And the opaque bands are the slow growth. So when it's cooler, we don't really have great seasonality in Florida, but we have enough that you can use these bony structures.
I was about to ask you that. Can you like, so I got some kids that follow, and I don't want to be too technical. So the otolith that she's talking about is actually a bone in the fish's ear. And we use that. You can section it and then look at it like a tree. It lays down growth rings like you would age a tree. So that's what she's describing for anybody who's not familiar. Is she's looking at growth rings on bony structures from the fin. And that's important because we can take those and not kill the fish like you do the ear bone, because you have to kill the fish to get to the ear bone.
Yeah, that's right.
For our younger folks following along there. Okay, so what was like what ages were you seeing the fish at Rodman?
So that's a good question. One of the oldest fish that I ended up aging in that study was 12, which is pretty old. I have aged spines that are older than 12. The oldest spine I've ever aged was 13, so not much older. Although when we use otoliths, there have been past studies that have aged fish up to 16. So, and that's on Kingsley Lake, which is a lake up in Clay County where, like I said, it has really deep depths, and fish tend to get really old there because they have areas that they can hang out in the lake that prevent them from getting so stressed out during the hottest months of the year.
I see. That's interesting. So Kingsley's the round one, right?
Yep. Looks perfectly round.
How was that for anybody? Like, it's kind of west of Jacksonville, I guess. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's right.
So it's straight north of me, really. How was it made? How was that lake formed? Does anybody know that? So
there's a few theories, and I actually don't know which one is factual, which one is true. I've heard that it was a meteor strike. I've heard that it's a sinkhole. Those are the two of the most common theories that I've heard. I think I would tend to go with the sinkhole idea. There are some springs in there, and it's a really clear lake. That's sort of what I lean towards. We spend a lot of time out there, my boss and I, because he's done quite a bit of different tracking studies, because he's a trophy bass biologist too. So I tend to reference Kingsley a lot because it is a lake I work on now, but I don't want to derail us from Rodman.
Oh, well, I know, right? We've already lost track, and that's my fault. I'm the one who's getting this on track here. All right.
I do want to tell you my result, though, because you asked about it, for my study. So I told you that we aged fish up to age 12, and there were fish at all other ages that we looked at 1, 2, everything and beyond. And so one of the things that we found was that in our model, when we looked at precision, basically precision, it was most dependent on the type of structure that you were aging. So otoliths are the most precise structure to use when you're aging bass, and pelvic spines were the least precise structure. So we sort of wanted to weigh these structures and figure out, well, which one's the best one to take, so that maybe in the future we could have even anglers who catch bass collect spines or fin structures and send them to us so that we can do some advanced citizen science that is people who are specifically targeting big fish. And that was sort of one of the objectives of this study, was in the end to find something that we could use in advanced citizen science. And the second most important result was when we looked at bias, which is more important, I think, than precision, because it's looking and saying, well, it's kind of like accuracy. So when we looked at that was more dependent on who was actually aging the structure.
Right.
So the reader had an influence on that. And there's a lot of things that can go into that, like experience. You should use like a reference set when you're aging fish. You should practice and make sure that it's really specific to the water body that you're actually trying to conduct research on, because it can vary. Growth and the way that the rings are laid down varies across all the different systems in Florida. So
that's crazy, isn't it?
The best structure that we chose based on like location and ease of taking a fin structure, as well as some of these other results, was the dorsal spine. And I've sort of alluded to that a few times. Everything else was pretty similar across the board for structures. They weren't really, bias wasn't really affected by which structure I was aging. It was more dependent on who was reading it. So in the end, when we weighed all our results, we chose the dorsal spine. They tend to be like the most robust structure, so the strongest structure on the fish. When you remove them, bass have like eight of them, so it doesn't really hurt them. And if you take the central ones, the first few and the last few sort of protect the ones that are in the middle that you remove. So that is a method that we still do use. And we do have some citizen scientists that collect dorsal spines for us for FWC.
Oh, okay. That is really interesting. I've never even heard of that before.
Yeah.
Okay. So back to, you mentioned a second ago, back to one of my 60 million questions, that you had to come over here so many times and do electrofishing to catch all these fish on Rodman. So if you were to go fishing on Rodman with all your vast electrofishing experience, where exactly would you go?
Somebody asked me that the other day. I think the Orange Springs, or I think Orange Springs, out of all the times that I did sampling, I would probably go and fish around that area.
So around Kenwood area?
Yeah.
The boat ramp over there?
Yeah, definitely. And some of the more vegetated areas, not the deeper channelized portions or anything like that.
Really, just in the heavy vegetation?
I think so.
Flat bottom, no transitions or ledges, anything like that over? Probably
try to fish some of the transition zones. When we were out there electrofishing, we found fish on a lot of those transitions, especially between an area where fish might be feeding and an area where there might be, I'm trying to think. So a lot of times fish we would shock fish when we were in the channelized portion on the edge where there was vegetation coming over. So
right.
I guess, the transitions.
Yeah, I've seen that. That's one of the places I watch for where the barge canal and the vegetation gets close together. I've been successful in those places too. Very interesting. Okay, so I'm going to get off Robin, although I could stay there for the next 4 hours, and go back to Kingsley, the Round Lake, the Meteorite Lake, or the Sinkhole Lake. Because before we came on, we briefly mentioned that you guys had done some trout stocking in there, and ties together beautifully with what we have going, because we just stock some rainbows in the little example pond that I use in Georgia. So talk to me about what you guys have going with the rainbow trout study.
Okay, so the rainbow trout study, and if you want more information on this, it is Drew Dutter. He's the PI, the project lead on this study. So basically what we were trying to do is do some supplemental forage stocking, and that's a part of a bigger project called the Florida Trophy Bass Project. It has like 3 arms. It has a documentation arm, which is trophy catch, which we hadn't talked about yet. I work on that I work within that program as well. And then we also have the promotional tier of the Florida Trophy Bass Project, and then we have the management tier. And so the management tier is what the trout project is under. And basically what we're trying to do is Kingsley Lake has had the most 13+ pound bass that have ever been approved into the trophy catch program. So It's very unique. Yes, and it also is in the top 5 for the most fish that are 10+ pounds in the program. I think it's actually number 2. And so it's got 10 to fish that have been caught 15 pounds in the lake. So we found that it would be a good and suitable location to try to beef up the fish even more, because we were sort of challenged by one of our commissioners to basically grow bigger and better bass. And so when he says bigger, he means bigger than 15 pounds.
That's big.
That's really hard.
Yeah, that's really hard.
There's only a few places, in Florida, I think right now that could have fish that size. And Kingsley and Orange Lake are definitely 2 of the ones that just pop into my head right away. Just they're completely 2 different habitats, but really, we're not going to stock trout in Orange that they wouldn't live there.
No.
Kingsley is a deep lake. It's it's a mesotrophic lake for Florida. And there's also not like a lot of other forage options for bass there. So trout are a good suitable option to do in the wintertime. We also did some lake chubsucker plantings there. And I think this past year, Drew had told me that he saw some small lake chubsuckers when he was going up and shocking in some of the creeks. Okay. So some of the stockings that we did held over. We're hoping that maybe there's some brooders in there that'll continue to produce more young for lake chubsuckers, right. Which is, when we're not stocking trout, we can move over and hopefully we, at some point, won't have to stock lake chubsuckers, but we were stocking those 2 forage types for bass. And you had asked about the trout project. What we're doing with that is we're tagging, we're putting 2 different types of tags in trout there. One of them is an acoustic tag, but it's actually called a depredation tag. And what it is it has like a little, I think it's like a protein or an enzyme inside it. And when it gets eaten by a fish, so this acoustic tag is embedded in the abdomen of the trout. Okay. And then the trout gets consumed by another fish, like a bass. It breaks down this little enzyme in the tag, and it tells us, it flips the tag over, and it tells us that it's been eaten. So it's pretty crazy. And so we can go out there. You'd have to ask him how expensive those tags are, but I would imagine they're a little bit more expensive than a normal radio tag with an antenna. And like the old time, we still use radio tags though, and we'll go out there and we have our antenna and we go around, and whenever we're near one, we'll pick it up based on our frequency that we have. So we also have like an array out there that picks up these acoustic tags. So it's basically like in a certain pattern on the bottom of the lake. It also has like temperature readers on it so that we can track the temperature of different parts of the lake. We can track when certain trout come in that area. So yeah, that's kind of what the tagging stuff's about. 3 different things. It's like measuring temperature, it's measuring when the fish are eaten, and it's measuring where they are. So
unbelievable. It's amazing the technology they have out now. I mean, I have my little my bass are pit tagged in the pond. You can swipe them with a code reader. That is amazing. So just so we can clarify, because maybe most people don't know, Kingsley is super deep. How deep? You'll know.
I think it gets to in the center. I believe it's around like 80 feet deep.
Yeah.
A lot of the times when we're going out to the center to place our array for the tags, we will be mainly in like, we're not in 80 feet of water. We're in like 50 feet of water on like the edge of it and stuff. But yeah.
Yeah, compared to orange, it's like 6-7 feet over there. Yeah. It's a completely different environment.
For sure.
And I wonder what it is about the depth, because it's got to have some kind of correlation, right? Are the bass suspending in places that fishermen can't find them? Is there something going on there that it's giving them an advantage to get to that 13-pound size?
Well, yeah. So that was like a previous study that my supervisor had worked on. He was trying to understand why those fish are getting to be so big there. And yeah, depth, like I mentioned earlier, plays a part in that, mainly because in the summer months or in the warmer months, the fish have a place of refuge. So they're not stressed. They're not having to hang out in shallow water. So during that time, they can conserve their energy, which then hopefully it can go towards growth instead of trying to keep up with just staying alive.
Right.
And then another thing that goes into, so those fish are also like living longer. So then that gives them more time to.
Right. Well, I would think that would correlate with the stress reduction though, right?
I'm sure. I'm not sure if we have the results on that specifically, but I think so. Yeah,
that would make sense to me completely. But, what do I know? All right, I made some notes too. There was I briefly talked with Jason when he came on. We touched on a little bit on the mortality study after the tournaments, and I got a lot of traction on a few of my posts talking about some of the results there. Did you work on that mortality study, or do you know what's going on there?
I did not work on that study, so I've only heard brief results, like preliminary results through the grapevine on that. But I do know that I've listened to Jason when he was on here, what he was talking about. So there were some higher than normal, I guess, higher than expected, definitely specifically delayed mortality from tournaments, but that was in the summer months. And I guess just from a biological standpoint, that's sort of to be expected based on a lot of things we just talked about. The fact that fish are under a lot more stress during the summer months and those higher temperatures. So that's, just because we let the fish go doesn't necessarily mean that they weren't stressed out all day long being drug around in a live well and then ultimately released. And we hope not at a boat ramp. We hope that it's a place where there's a little bit more oxygen and some flow and some cover for the fish. So.
Yeah, I've noticed that here in Florida, the signage around the boat ramps, because a lot of the ramps are kind of back in on these fingers in extremely shallow water with extremely excessive vegetation. And I've covered it many times, but we can cover it again real quick. When you get into that situation, especially when it's hot, you're going to have really low oxygen. And the more alive things in the water, plants included, contribute to that low oxygen. Mm-hmm. So when these tournaments, when they put the fish back all in that shallow water, that's bad. They can die there and kill all the fish that they catch in the tournament. So that's really important. And one of the reasons why I come on and talk so much about, I knew, I was not surprised. I actually was kind of thought that the mortality would be higher for the summertime tournaments. But I was not shocked by those numbers just based on my observations of fish handling in general. I try to preach that real hard,
Mm-hmm. There were a few years when I first started that I helped out with the Save Rodman tournament. And so we would actually have a release boat, which was really cool. So we'd be able to sit there and attend the weigh-in. And then as people came in and weighed their fish, they would go straight from being weighed into our release boats. And then we would just pretty much run them back out to the main lake so they didn't get released right there at the ramp. But that's definitely something to think about in these other tournaments, to maybe have a release boat or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I would like to see more I would like to see improvement in the fish handling, especially the Florida bass. I never really framed it, or I really thought about it in the way that Jason framed it, in that these fish occur naturally here, and even though I'm just from Georgia, they don't occur naturally there, really, where I'm from, in the northern part anyway.
Right.
And the differences and how they have to be protected, and part of that protection, I think, how do I frame this? The bigger the fish gets, I think that's what a 1 pound fish, or as I like to call them, fish tacos, can go in a cooler. All right. I don't care what you do with that fish. And generally you should probably put most of your 1 pounders in a cooler. That's right. But it's the bigger they get, the rarer they get. So once they're up at that 9, 10, that double, now you've got something that's extremely rare. And the handling becomes extremely important. So that's kind of where I'm coming from on that one. And everybody had to have panic attack on the mortality. I mean, it really did not go over well. But unfortunately for social media, things that don't go over well get shared the most.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
I was going to say, so you mentioned the 9, 10 pound fish. I don't know if I told you the statistic, but from our trophy catch data, Rodman Reservoir definitely it ranks as number 1 for our what's called our trophy club level. So that's the 10 to 12.99 pound fish that are submitted. So Rodman has actually 216 fish that have been approved into the program that are 10 to 12.99 pounds. And that's number 1. The next closest lake to that is Kingsley, which is 172. So it's 215 or 216 to 172. That's still a lot more fish that have been caught and approved from Rodman. So it's really a remarkable place.
It is a remarkable place. I love it here. And what's interesting too is it's really it's a man-made place for one. But it really is, it's just kind of a wide spot in the river more than there's a tremendous amount of flow here. It doesn't really look like a lake, even when it's calm out there. You can just see the water flowing past out there. It's got a lot of flow. And that I think it makes it a unique place. And with it like locking it out to the St. John's, all kinds of, I guess, are they pogies that come in here, or are they bluebacks? What's coming in here? All these little bait fish that run in the springtime.
Oh, I'm not sure which ones you mean.
I don't know. They look like herring of some kind.
Okay. Well, I was going to say, I've seen it could be shad.
It could be gizzards or something like that?
No, it could be
or threadies.
Well, those are both in there. Gizzard shad are for sure in there, and threadfin shad when I've been out there a lot. But it's I'm blanking on the name of my coworkers would be scolding me because they do work on a specific type of shad. I think it's an American shad.
American shad is out here. Interesting.
I think that's what
And there are chub sucker in here, I would imagine. I don't know how.
There are chub sucker, yeah.
Yeah, and what makes them such good bass forage? What's so unique about the chub sucker?
Well, there's been a lot of historic papers showing that. Not a lot, but there have been several papers showing that trophy bass like to eat like chub sucker. I think, in my opinion, that they like to take them down because they have soft fins on them. There's no sharp spines or anything, and they sort of just go down easy, kind of like a trout. But they definitely don't have the same caloric input as like a trout does. Trout have a lot of omega-3s, and they're pretty calorically dense for bass. So they're also doing like a calorimetry study to try to compare these different prey items like trout and bluegill. They're looking at chub sucker, and I think they looked at koi, but I think Jason may have talked about that study a little bit. But that's really unique. I mean, we'll be able to understand a lot more about sort of the question that you just asked, what makes them a better or a more interesting food source for big bass.
Right. I think you're touching on it there with it's easier to eat.
That's, in my opinion, that's what I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's several places by me that have just like really dense like chubsucker populations. I live near like Watermelon Pond, which is over here near High Springs, Alachua County.
I've heard of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that place actually has had some historic catches on it. I think Porter Hall has caught some real big fish there in the past, but that is a spot that if you go out there and you shock around, tons and tons of lake chubsucker. I think that's a spot where we've actually done some shock and stock. So there's a big enough population that we're able to take some and move them to a different spot.
Mm-hmm.
They're just naturally reproducing. I think one of the things that people struggle with lake chubsucker is we try to do like have them in confined tanks so that we would have like a good amount of them that we could pull from if we wanted to go and stock them, and we're having a lot of trouble keeping them alive. They were just getting a lot of different like bacterial infections and different things like that from being in a tank with other lake chubsucker. So that's one that I think even the hatchery hasn't cracked the code on that yet. I know that they have had some success, I think, in Wilaka in ponds raising them, but not in tanks really.
Interesting. And are they I forget. Are they just a river fish here, or do they run out? Are they a brackish water fish? They require brackish water?
No.
Straight freshwater?
Yep.
Okay.
Freshwater. Yeah, they're from family Catastomidae, so that's the sucker family.
Right.
And they have that like the down mouth that goes down. So.
Right. I remember when I was at Georgia, there was a well, let's see, it was I think again, I'm going back 1,000 years. I think they thought it was gone. I think they thought it was a lost species, but it was the red horse, the robust red horse. You remember? You heard about that one? And we had those. I would have to go feed those. So I'm pretty sure if my memory serves, they thought they were gone, and then somebody found them, occurring again in the Oconee River there. And so we had these fish, these tiny little fish, and I had to feed those guys. It was my job to go in every, so often. I don't remember what it was, and feed those fish at the fish lab. And I can just remember like in doing that job and I had another job where we sampled 36 Southern Appalachian streams twice a year for one guy's PhD project that I work with. And the diversity in the streams, it's like you got to be a genius to understand all that.
That's the word that I was going to say was diversity, because I was just thinking about, Tennessee also has that. If you go and sample, I haven't done it myself, but we were just at a national AFS meeting, or it was a Southern Division AFS meeting in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and they were just going through all the different species. It's a really biodiverse place. So, same with Georgia. So I think Georgia has they've got a lot of different sucker species.
Yes. I don't remember all the trivia about it. My Lord Almighty, we had enough of them to study. That
sounds like a cool project.
Say that again.
I said that sounds like a cool project, sampling all those places.
It was so fun. I got to go and just backpack, and we would seine off a 100-meter section of stream, and it was like it was tied into GIS, but it was like a stream bank, like a watershed study, where if it's a forested watershed or an agriculture or an urban watershed, and the diversity of the species of fish that versus the watershed that was around the river there. And so that was fun. Really enjoyed that.
Did you find that there were was it less diverse in some of the spots that had like agriculture, like you're talking about, or?
Oh yeah, you nailed it. Agriculture was the worst. We would start on the stream, and it would be like if the stream would be like forested up at the top, and then you come down on the same stream, and then go follow it. So, and you go up into the mountains and just be in these little narrow streams with 20, 30, 36 species sometimes, just very diverse darters and cyprinids and everything you can imagine in there. And then you come down the hill mile or two and you get to where the cattle rancher lets the cattle walk into the it plummets to like 6-8 species of cyprinids only. And then you go back out into the urban and you got garbage and it looks kind of, it doesn't look very nice. But then in those urban streams, you would see those species return, not to 36, but, like 20 or 25 species would come back.
Okay. That's good.
That's just what I noticed. I don't know what he found on his, I don't even really know what he was doing with his project. I was just hired to electrofish and lug gear all over God's world.
Speaking of electrofishing, when I first met you, the main thing that you were excited about was the fact that I had electrofished a 13-pounder.
Yes. Yeah.
You have that on your list?
Tell me about, it's on there. It's on there. Tell me about that one.
Yeah, so that was like in my last few months or something of being a grad student. And honestly, probably the biggest fish that we had shocked up until then was maybe like 9.5 pounds or something. And so then the big girl came out to play, and it was on a transition zone, like sort of, I think it was just as we were going along the channelized portion, and then the barge canal, and then the vegetation. We have coordinates on it, so I can send it to you after this. But
oh yeah,
we put a dart tag.
Don't say that on here. Don't say
it. We put a dart tag in that fish, and this was in 2018. So who knows? That fish has probably passed on due to natural mortality. I'm sure. But
what I've always found, though, in my little pond management experience, those places will consistently hold fish over time.
I'm sure. Yeah, that's a good point. So that fish came up, and it was funny because it was I wasn't the driver in this situation. It was my other coworker, and then we had two people on the deck of the boat. It was me and Drew, and that fish came up. It looked like a little porpoise, like a little dolphin or something, a whale. It came right up out, and it actually went into his net. Like he put his net out, and he just put his net out and
went right in.
Got it in there. Yeah, it was crazy. It looked like a little whale. And when we got it in, it was 13 point. It was like right on the dot of 13 pounds.
Oh wow!
That's the biggest fish that I've ever seen, and I've done quite a bit of electrofishing since then. So, and I've never seen anything comparable to that one.
Yeah, what was the length on that fish?
I don't remember the length on it. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm just curious.
Some of those fish, though, that. Yeah, I'm trying to rack my brain, but I don't remember. When I think about fish length, I think some of the longest fish that we've ever measured are on like Kingsley Lake. Like there's some fish on there that are Kingsley and Orange. There's been some fish reported from Orange that are anglers measuring them, but 28.5 inches long. Yeah.
Yeah, you put any kind of decent weight on that fish, and it's a unit.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. And Jason was talking about, I kind of tied it together in our pond management stuff. We recommend a lot of times to drain the pond. It's easier to get control of it and cheaper and just a much faster process just to start it from scratch.
Start over.
Yeah, just start it all over. And that kind of happens at Orange Lake too, it sounded like.
It has happened, and it does have those natural dewatering events. Like just because there are some places where water can pretty much leave, like when you're in a drought, a lot of that water can start to go back down into the ground. And so I think that was in there's been a couple of times, like 2012, and then potentially I think 6 years before that, there were 2 drought periods. And then right before I came and moved down here, there was a drought period. Mm-hmm. So those dry periods definitely cause, like you said, the bottom, some of the bottom to be exposed, which also happens out at Rodman when the sediments are exposed. And so that basically creates, you're killing off a lot of the non-native plants, and you're causing basically like a regrowth of like some of these native plants. When the water comes back up, then it's really like a whole new rebirth or restart of some of these natives, nice plants and nice habitat for juvenile fish is what it is. And so then you have like a really big boom, a really good year class right after that, and then those fish probably have more to eat, and so then that cohort is just gonna carry through and be a strong, really most likely could produce more trophy fish.
Right. Yeah. No, I think it falls right right along the lines of that. Like you start them over in ponds, and literally you can't get fish to grow faster. People like, oh, I want to do it right. Okay, we'll do it like that because I can't do it any quicker than that. They're going to rock and roll.
Yeah.
That's really interesting on that. So the drought, now that's a 10,000 acre lake, right?
For Orange Lake or
Orange Lake.
I think it's around 12,900 acres or something. So it's a little bigger than that, but yeah.
All right. And then when it goes to drought and the water pulls out, what's the pool go to then?
What the level? Man, I think at one point you'd have to ask. I don't know the exact numbers here for this. You'd have to ask like one of the guys I work with here, Travis Tootin. His expertise was Orange Creek Basin for a long time, but it's real low. I mean, the fish have just like barely anywhere to swim. Just a few little pools.
Right.
And some of the fish somehow they've managed to survive. Like there was a fish that we had aged from there, a 13-pound fish from Orange that I didn't shock that one. A coworker of mine did, but we took a dorsal spine on it because we wanted to age it. And that fish had survived. We tracked it back. It had survived the most recent drought.
Holy cow.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Pretty neat.
Yeah, I wonder how it did it.
Just figured it out.
All right. So on my next list of things here, so with all your experience, where do you recommend? I've got some guys coming up this week for a kayak fishing tournament.
Okay.
And where would you recommend some access for good bass fishing for kayak fishermen around here? Ocala, Gainesville, Rodman area.
Yeah. So I don't want to squeak on this one, but I would say since it's a publicly accessible water body, one of the first places that I think of that's a special place for me where I actually caught my personal best is Wildcat Lake in the Ocala National Forest. Yes. There's a publicly accessible boat ramp. I think there is a little fee, but if you have a kayak, I think that would be one of my first places to go.
Okay.
That's around that area. I actually caught an 8.75 pound bass out of a Wildcat Lake.
What'd you catch it on?
I caught it on a live shiner.
Shiner fishing.
Yep.
That is that's the cheat code around here.
Well, it's certainly caught me a lot of big bass. I've also caught like a fish that was around 8 pounds on a live shiner on Johns Lake.
Okay.
In Orlando.
Johns Lake.
Mm-hmm. That's actually another good spot. It's not super close to us, but for kayak fishing, I would say that's another good spot.
Okay.
Let's see, around here, you could probably find some sneaky spots in a kayak on Orange Lake around here. And I would say that a good percentage of people that submit fish to trophy catch are fishing in a kayak on Orange Lake.
No kidding.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And they can get into some of those little sneaky spots that are super vegetated, and you could probably go back there and punch for them probably better than even if you're using.
No, that's a great idea because I didn't really think about that. You're right though, because the hydrilla in there, I burned a trolling motor out up there. I left it clicked on and it was in the motor. I burned it up. It's stupid. But yeah, you don't have those problems with a kayak. So you're exactly right. You can sneak around. Now, I haven't been over there in a while. Does the hydrilla hold out all winter? Does it fall out and die and come back? Is it gone right now?
No, it's not gone right now, but some of it holds on. Yeah. I'm not sure what the percent coverage is right now. That would be another question for Steve Beck or Travis, who work on the Orange Creek Basin. But
you get off my tail end and go fishing over there and know too. But
I don't think I would say, like, I was looking at my list of the 10 plus pound places to fish. And when you said kayak, I was like looking through my list and I was thinking, Kingsley, it's has less access for people just because it's on the Camp Landing. Another good one that I had on here for 10 plus pound fish was Lake Kissimmee, which I think that's no secret. Everybody knows that. And then Istapoga, Placid, Toho, Fellsmere. And actually, I do have one on here that'd be good for kayak. Lake Hernando. And some of those lakes over there in the Sala-Popka chain, over there in Citrus and Hernando counties, that's another spot that has a ton of lake chub suckers. And it's also a spot where a couple anglers have caught some really big fish. I don't know if it was last year, we had an approved 13 plus pound fish from Lake Hernando. Yeah. All right. And I would say for kayak, that would be a good one.
Now, I can't call it, and I didn't write this down, and I meant to. I was reading on the FWC page that there's a smaller lake north of me here in the trophy. You guys are doing some trophy management work.
Yeah, Swanee Lake? Is that
Swanee Lake? There you go. And I wanted to ask you about that one too.
I think Swanee Lake would be a good kayak option for sure. It's also a good option for if you don't have a kayak or a boat. There's a couple piers that we have built out there for pier fishing. And actually, a few times that I've went out there shocking, we've shocked like a couple 7-pound fish around those piers. So, and I see people fishing out there a lot with even artificials and stuff. So it would certainly be a place to try. I know that if I was to go out there and kayak fish, I would also bring some panfish gear because there's some giant bluegills. There's some giant bluegills, giant shell crackers, and we've got like feeders out there. We have brush piles. We have fish attractors. There's a lot of structure, and there's trees everywhere. Like, it's too bad that I don't have my background up. I usually have like the Swanee Lake background. It's just tons and tons of cypress trees in the background, and it's pretty crazy. I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of it.
I have. Just what you guys have online. I've been meaning to go up there. How many acres is that one again?
I actually don't know. It's really small. I feel like it's only like 1,000 acres or something like that.
Only.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a lot smaller than Orange, is what I'm saying.
Oh, I know.
A lot smaller than Orange.
Yes. But I definitely want to go up there and check that one out. Are there any other of those? So we got Kingsley and we've got Swanee. Are there any other trophy managed lakes like that in North Florida?
So we did some trophy bass management on Lake Victor, which is up in like northwest, like kind of near the Panhandle area, but not quite all the way west. It's sort of by like Porter Lake, if you ever heard Porter Lake, Lake Victor, Gap Lake, some of those sandy bottom lakes up in that area. We've done some trophy bass management there. Mainly, I think it was for use of circle hooks with live shiners, but we haven't done as much management actions as much as we've done trophy bass regulations on that specific water.
Circle hooks with black shiners, is that what you just said? I'm looking.
No, I said circle hooks with shiner, like for live shiners.
Shiners.
Yeah, like you'd have to use a circle hook if you were fishing with live shiners.
I'm with you. I'm with you. Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, I think it was on my end. It didn't come through quite right.
No worries.
Well, that is. I'm gonna scroll back on Instagram. Sometimes folks will throw a question or something in a chat, and I don't want to miss. It looks like it's pretty busy over there.
I just fact checked myself for the Suwannee Lake acreage, and I was very far off from true acreage. So I'll just be honest and tell everybody that it's not that big. It's 63 acres, not 900 acres.
Okay, good. There we go. That's more my speed there. 63 acres is now you're punching at my weight level.
Yeah, you could, and you can hit the whole shoreline on that lake if you were in a kayak. There's plenty of structures to fish, man-made and natural. So.
And it sounds like there's plenty of big fish in there.
Yeah, there are. I think the condition is one of the things that we're trying to watch on those fish, just because we've been doing a decent amount of small fish removals. We're trying to get the condition better on some of those biggest fish, like the 40+ centimeter fish, because the lake got overcrowded with bass. So
yeah, that does happen.
Yeah, and so we've been every single year removing hundreds of, we probably have to do more than hundreds of removals of fish that are 16 inches or less.
Okay, so you guys are doing that every year?
We have been, yeah.
And even though it's open to the public and people can go and keep the fish, that's one of the things that I run into a lot. And people assume that it's the bank fishing's taking all the fish away. It never really occurs to them that the harvesting of the fish is beneficial to the fishery.
Mm-hmm. What we've looked at from some of our tagging studies, it's like a 96% voluntary release rate. Like most people are not making a dent in in that. But I think we would just have to keep removing more fish that are less than 16 inches in that lake to make a difference. We're kind of seeing a difference, but we've only been doing it for a few years. So I think if we keep on it, some of those fish that we've hopefully bulked up the condition on that are a little bit bigger than the 16 inches are going to keep growing and feeding on so we've done stockings there too. Hopefully they'll start feeding on some of we've done like threadfin shad in there. We've done trout in there. We've done chub suckers. So I think they're actually working on right now getting another prey item. I think they're working on gizzard shad, which that's a completely different direction than these other ones, but I think they want to try even
really
more.
Yeah. I like gizzard shad. I've used them quite a bit on smaller ponds. I had a pond years and years ago. It was only maybe 5 acres or so. It was on a fancy golf course in Atlanta. And that was one of my first experiences with them in a small body of water like that. And they just got in from the river. It was real close to the river in the floodplain. Mm-hmm. And they were switching the golf course around, and they just wanted to save as many fish as they could save. It's kind of a dog and pony show. And I told the guy that. I was like, I'm not going to catch all the fish. You know that, right? And he's like, oh, I know. He goes, I got a lot of chiefs around here, and they've approved it, and I just need you to go out there and catch as many as you can. I said, sure. And like I said, it was maybe a 4 or 5 acre pond, and I pulled probably, I think it was like 36 or 40 bass over 5.5 pounds.
Wow.
They just kept coming up. Crazy. And I was like, my God. And they really were. They're all footballs. They all look really good. And it was just a basic pond that gizzard shad had gotten into.
A bigger example of that, I know we keep going back to it, but is where you live on Rodman. They've got a lot of the big bass are eating gizzard shad.
There are some huge gizzard shad in here. I can see them all the time. The schools of shad here, especially right behind the dam, where it channelizes right there between the two docks. You could catch shad right there. you don't even try to throw the net and let it go to the bottom. You won't get it back. It'll be so full of shad.
I think the only thing that people are fearful of when they stock those is that they're going to get too big for bass to eat.
Yeah. I've seen that before too, in like a mid-size, or a lake, once you step past pond and you're in that lake, like that 50-acre area. Mm-hmm. I've seen that on those where the shad, and even up to 200, 300 acres, the shad just dominate this biomass so bad you can't do anything with them. It falls into that drain and restock it type of thing. I've never used them anywhere where I couldn't drain and restock it. On the same, in their defense, I've always put them in when there was ample young, healthy, strong bass to eat them too. So
they ate them all up and they didn't get too big, and then
they did a good job, keeping the recruitment down on them, but you also need like a big forage item, especially in ponds. They'll tend to eat up all the top end forage when you get a few big fish in a pond, and then that stops their growth because you just can't have very many of them.
Got it.
Yeah. And I don't know. Stuff I learned messing around growing fish in ponds all those years.
That's awesome. What a good experience.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. All righty. Let me go back one more time. Does anybody have a question? Please throw it in the comments from Summer. All right. Comments, no questions.
Somebody said the sweet smell of a roasted trolling motor.
Yeah, that's me.
Orange Lake.
Exactly. I'm getting ready to fire the boat back up and get back out on Rodman. I've been slacking off, but I've been inspired by my neighbor. He caught a 10.5 pounder last week.
Okay, yeah. I wasn't going to squeak out a secret, but there has been a fish submitted to Trophy Catch that was last week that is 13 pounds from Rodman.
Really?
Yes.
I won't squeak out a secret and tell you I know where it was caught.
Oh, really? Okay, maybe where it was caught. Yeah.
I will also tell everyone here, they'll be proud of me that I've been fishing there every day and have
oh my goodness.
Skunked.
Are you fishing with live shiners?
No, that's against my religion. I need some shiner help. I need you. Here's what we need to do. You just need to come and show me how to do this because I'm no good at it.
I'm learning myself. Trust me. These other guys are pros at it that I work
right.
With.
All right. So you need to help me. We need to get a group of people together, and then we can all learn because I'm not good at Florida bass fishing. It's hard.
It is hard. Somebody put up a comment about ice fishing. You see it?
Yeah, I put it up there. That's my friend Frank. He's from Canada, and he's funny too. He's our comic relief most of the time in the comments. He's been slow on the draw tonight. Frank, what's going on, Frank? You feeling bad? You're off your game tonight. He's making notes probably. He's a good dude though. So when is the last time you made an ice fishing trip? Summer?
The last time I went ice fishing was probably 2015. Yeah.
Wow, so that's a decade ago.
10 years.
A decade ago.
My blood is thin now. It's not thick.
How fast did it take you to get used to Florida?
I've heard that people who are not from Florida have it worse. Like when they come down here from the north, and then it'll be like real hot all the time, and then it'll get cold, and it's just freezing to those people. But that's just what I've heard. I mean, that's how I feel. I feel like when it's 40 degrees, I mean, I have like a vest on. It's 40 degrees here near Gainesville. So
my hoodie's on now. I'm all freezing. I've only been here 2 years and I can't take it when it's 45 degrees anymore. It's crazy. Oh, I missed Frank's hilarious comment from earlier. I'm sorry, Frank. I have to go back through the feed and check it out. He's ice fishing now, probably, Frank. In your honor. He says he's going to go.
Oh, yay.
In your honor.
Thank you.
Right? So that brings up a point, though. This is a good question. So I feel like, and this is just an observation. There's no science here. Just me out here. These Florida fish seem to pile up in holes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot more. Like it seems like when I'm back home, I can find fish on docks. I can find a few fish in shallow water. I can find a few fish here. I can find a few fish there. Not in Florida. I'm either 10, 15, 20 fish into a day, just wearing them out because I'm on them.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
Or I'm zero. I can't find that. You know what? Does that make sense?
It makes sense. Yeah. I think I've experienced that too when I fish with artificials. I don't know. Because I fish like I grew up not fishing with natural bait really. Unless I was fishing for like river fish, I use natural bait like worms and stuff, but never for bass. I was using like buzz baits, frogs, like jigs, and soft plastics. And I started fishing down here with those same baits that I thought would work in the same places, like you're talking about. And I didn't have as much success getting like one bite, like you said, off of a point, and then some over here in the lily pads. Or I don't know the answer to that as to if there's something behind it, but it's a good observation.
It's just a general observation that I've seen, and I've also noticed too that the Floridas seem more susceptible to reaction strike baits, jerk baits, yo-yo and rattle traps, anytime you can get something going from a starting position to a fast movement to a stopping position, and that stop and starting, I've had a lot more success on. Well, let's just say I don't go out there without a jerk bait.
Okay, yeah.
You know,
but that works for you even when it's even like through the summer and stuff?
Yeah,
like
I just rip them through the pads on straight braid.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm thinking about this as being a technique you only use, when fish are maybe a little finicky or something. But I guess, that.
No, actually, in the pad, is it spatter dock pads that are all back through there? Yeah, that's what I thought. So the spatter dock, it'll come through pretty good, like the Mega Bass 110 Junior, all those types of jerk. The Berkeley Stunna works pretty good. Definitely some work better than others. I think it has to do how they roll.
Okay.
But I can work them through the pads, through down underneath and pause them. And the thing about it is, it's always whenever I'm with the jerk baits around here. If I'm not catching fish, I'm not fishing fast enough. Okay. Put the speed to it.
I didn't know that. That's good to know. I'll have to try it next time.
Again, I'm just, what's happened to me, you know what I mean? And it's like you have that day where you're not getting bit, and I naturally tend to want to slow down. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I naturally would want to slow down or use something small. Like finesse them, as you hear. But
last year, actually, those guys are coming into town this year, so I hope to get some more tips. But last year, the Elite Series guys, they put it in Palaka and they fish over there. That's this weekend.
Yeah, I was going to say.
You go. Are you going?
I've got it on my calendar, so there may be one day that I can go. Yes. Maybe.
Okay, cool. Maybe I'll see you there. So when I was there last year, that's where I saw you. You guys were there, right?
Yep.
That's where I saw you. All right.
Yes.
I saw you there. All right. And then after I saw you guys, I went over and I met Rick Clun.
Oh my goodness.
I know, right?
That's so awesome.
And I bought everything he had. And his wife's super nice lady, and talked with her. But one of the things that happened was I made a post last year about his spinnerbait that I bought from him. And I was talking about slow rolling spinnerbaits. It's a favorite technique of mine. And Mr. Clun was kind enough to come on the Instagram and say, yep, that's a good technique, but don't forget to burn the spinnerbait. And I said, okay. So the next time I went down to the lake down there, I did just that. I put on his spinnerbait. And again, I just went on straight braid. and same technique, same idea as the jerk bait in the pads. You just throw the blade up in the pads and let it hunt, let it deflect, let it come over the leaves, and just all the speed you can put on it and to keep and keep it under the water. I keep my rod tip low, and all of a sudden I'm not getting skunked anymore.
Wow.
I'm not catching hundreds of fish, but I'm not getting skunked anymore, right?
There's a lake in the back of my mind where I need to try this, and where I need to try it with the jerk baits. It's Waberg Lake.
Okay.
Lake Waberg. That's like near. It's like there's access from Paynes Prairie, but then there's also access for like UF students to use it, like with paddle boats and stuff. But I bet that jerk bait stuff would work there, like ripping it, going fast.
Oh, I'm ready to go. I'm off on Thursday.
That's a spot. Yeah, it's just that. So Lake Waberg is tough because there's not a lot of vegetation there, and I haven't been able to find the fish that well. Like there's small little patches of spatterdock. That's about it. There's not much SAV. There's like some weird man-made. I think there's like ramps out there, like submerged ramps for like water skiing. And I've heard through the grapevine that fish might use that as like an underwater structure. But I'm thinking that could be a spot to go and try to use like some hard baits.
Yeah.
Like rattle traps and stuff.
Yep. Yo-yo and the traps. That's been my most successful. But again, let it go all the way to the bottom. And when you snap it, bring it and then let it fall. They'll hit it right then. Chrome and blue has been the best on the traps out here.
Cool.
Yep. Okay. Let's see. How long have we been going? We've gone over an hour. Okay. All right, boys. You got any other questions for Summer before we go down to the rabbit hole and talk for another 3 hours? I don't see anything, but my eyes have gotten bad in my old age. Favorite fisheries project? Oh, it's my friend Garrett. He's a young biologist at a Texas A&M.
Okay.
Over in Texas. Yeah. Garrett's been on with us a few times. Yeah, he does what I used to do, in that he's a private pond consultant and travels around helping people with ponds. So Garrett, we started this conversation out talking about her projects, about her research project for school and everything else, but we'll wrap it up. We'll go back to a project. Maybe not your favorite, but maybe one you thought was cool.
Yeah. So I think my favorite project definitely does have to do with one of the non-lethal aging projects. I think so far my favorite one is, I was sort of alluding to that advanced citizen science stuff. And what I mean by that is I had called anglers that I knew caught a lot of really big fish and talked to them and basically told them about my research and said, hey, we have this data set that we want to build so that we can have ages of our big fish so that we can look at growth across the whole state. And so it was really cool to work with the public and have them contribute to a data set. So I think that's my favorite project. And also seeing, like, there's this one fisherman, I won't give away his lake, but he has certainly submitted over 30 dorsal spines to me of trophy fish, which is impressive in one season. So
in one season.
Yep.
Yeah. That, especially, like I said, especially around here, especially with the pressure that they get. What do you think about the fishing pressure? Do you think, I have my opinions on that, but what's your opinion of, like, say Rodman right here? I saw 5.
Oh, Rodman is
pressure. Eyesight. Yeah. Within my eyesight this morning on my walk, I saw 5 guide boats.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know all the guides too, not personally, but just know which guys are out there. So it's pressured. Rodman's pressured. I would say that Orange is pressured now too. Just because if you go out there trying to park there's boats everywhere from other states. Once these places get out, there's only a small window where people are going to probably find a fish of a lifetime. So they're going to be willing to drive there and fish as much if they're crazy about it and they have the time. But out of those two, like overall across Florida, I don't have a good concept of how pressured other places are. I mean, I would imagine that like the Kissimmee chain is people still probably not as much.
I don't know. It seems like it especially like the fishing pressure that I'm used to is more like bass fishing tournament pressure, where this is not that at all. This is you can always spot them. There's always 3 men in the boat. There's the guide and the 2 clients, and they know exactly where the fish are, and they go there with the live bait, and they know they got them dialed in.
They got them dialed in, yeah.
Yeah, they're dialed in, and I think then that genetically makes the bass more dialed in to all the little things, the noises and all that. It's more and more and more, and you're like 50 or 100 years of these guys coming, and then the fish breeding and getting smarter, and then the techniques and electronics changing. And I just think it's a really, really challenging place to fish. And I like it better that way, though. I don't want to go out there. If it's not challenging, it's not fun,
I want to go out there and catch one right away. I want to just cast. There were some spots like that in Minnesota. I could just cast a Senko. I could cast a Senko and I catch a 6.5 pounder.
That is not Robbie Reservoir. That is not it. It looks like that. It looks like you can look in any direction and be like, I'm catching a fish right there, and it's going to be the biggest fish in my life every time you cast.
No, it's tough. You're right.
It is not. It's not. It is not. Well, I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I really appreciate you coming on and talking with me about all this stuff.
Yeah, it was fun. We went over time, but it was good. And you got to fact check me on those bluebacks. I have to check on that. That's the only thing that I didn't know when you asked me a question about the American shad. I have to see if that's what you're talking about. I'll ask somebody.
Well, and I'm wondering, I'm thinking they're bluebacks, or no, I'm thinking they're like ocean run threadies or brackish water threadies. They're just beefy, bulkier, different shape, like just healthier than what I'm normally used to seeing in ponds where I put them, and they don't even really do good most of the time. We stock them in the little pond. They're weird. Like in ponds, if you have a good plankton bloom, like 18, 24, 25 inches visibility, threadies are great. They will crank. But if you don't have a consistent bloom, they'll be as inconsistent as your bloom.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's weird. But if you have, especially a place that has a super dense bloom, oh man, the threadfin shad will stack in ponds like that. It's ridiculous what happens when they're in there. But I think that's what I'm seeing.
Okay. I'll ask though, because there's a couple biologists that do research on the shad that I'm talking about, the American shad. So I'll look into
it. Okay. Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. Well, again, I thank you so much for coming on. Thanks, guys, for all you all watching, and any of the guys who are social media guys who need help. I think you need to have Summer on there for some content and get some science in your feed, in your stream. We need more facts out there in fishing, and that's why we come on here and do this once a week or so. So thanks for watching, and thanks again, Summer, for coming on.
Thank you so much, Shan. See you guys.